Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Mountaineer Farm Talk. I'm J.J. Barrett from Wood County, and of course, my co-hosts are with me today is John David Johnson. What's up, JD?
Oh, just hanging in here, learning about a little hemlock beetles and some other insects today, and excited about the program.
Great. And then, of course, we've got Evan Wilson from over in Wayne Cabell. What's up, Evan?
Oh, it's good. Always good to learn something new. I got some hemlock questions down here we've had in the last couple of years since I've been down here and trying to find some better solutions for them today.
Well, good. Like I said, Mountaineer Farm Talk is a weekly podcast featuring interviews with extension professionals and other agricultural experts about timely topics important to West Virginia agriculture. And our mission is simple: to provide educational, research-based information to people all across the Mountain State. So join us every Friday at 10 a.m. for Mountaineer Farm Talk, and we'll learn, laugh, share, and enjoy a cup of cowboy coffee or herbal tea. We encourage audience participation, so have your questions ready. As of course, our special guest today is Bud Mayfield, and he is with the U.S. Forest Service. Welcome to the program, Bud.
Hey, thanks for having me, JJ. I consider it an honor. I'm a West Virginia native, grew up in Preston County, so also went to WVU. So it's great to be with you all this morning.
Good. We're glad to have you. I just before the program, we were talking a little bit. Of course, you said that you are from the large metropolis of Arthurdale, West Virginia. Give us a little bit of your background and some of your experience in forestry.
Yeah, sure. I in college is when I first actually started getting interested in forestry. I took some electives and realized that forestry is just a really exciting academic discipline, and it gets you out in the woods, which of course I love. And so I decided to go back to my home state of West Virginia for a master's degree in forestry. I worked with Ray Hicks. He was my major professor, and studied red spruce ecology and regeneration up on Godnear Knob, and decided to stay in school. And I went to the forestry school up in Syracuse, New York, SUNY ESF, where I did my doctoral degree. And that's where I started getting into entomology. And I studied forest entomology there. And then my first job out of graduate school was in Gainesville, Florida. So I went from north to south, and I worked for the Florida Division of Forestry for 7 years as their forest entomologist. It was a lot of the kind of work that you guys do. It was a lot of extension, working with landowners and county foresters, trying to figure out pest problems and give practical advice. And then when I finished up in that about 11 years ago, I got a job with the U.S. Forest Service here in Asheville, North Carolina, and that's where I've been since. And now I do research on forest insects, mostly non-native invasive forest pests, looking at biology and management of those critters, one of which is the hemlock woolly adelgid.
Yeah, Bud, let's go ahead and dig right into this topic. For tell us about the hemlock woolly adelgid, where it came from, why it's important to well, let me back up a minute.
Yeah.
Why are give us a little background on hemlocks and why they're so important to our forests and our ecosystem here, for not only in West Virginia, but probably a lot of the East Coast. Am I right?
That's right. That's right. It's a great way to start. We actually have two species of hemlocks native to the eastern U.S. One of them is down here in the southern Appalachians, and it grows up on the high rocky ridges and places you wouldn't expect hemlock to grow. It's called Carolina hemlock, has a very small distribution. And the other one is pretty well known. It's eastern hemlock, or some folks call it Canada hemlock. And it's distributed from Alabama all the way up into Ontario and Nova Scotia, and up into the Lake States. And one of the reasons it's so important is that well, some folks refer to it as a foundation species or a keystone species because it has such a strong influence on the other types of organisms and plants and fauna that grow there and occur there. One of the things that makes it so important is that it's both evergreen and shade tolerant, and has a real thick canopy, so it creates a lot of shade and a lot of structure in the forest. So you've got green all year long and throughout the different levels of the canopy. You're also putting litter, this acidic litter, on the ground all throughout the year, rather than these pulses of litter that we get in the fall for our deciduous species. And so that acidic litter fall and that heavy shade through the real thick canopy, it creates a special kind of environment where hemlocks tend to proliferate. So they kind of create their own shady, acidic environment that perpetuates hemlock. And it also just has a lot of different species that depend on it. You know, if you pretty much can't walk into a hemlock stand in the spring and not hear the black-throated green warbler. It's one of those birds that is associated very heavily with hemlock. You're only going to find it when hemlock is around. There are a lot of aquatic invertebrates that depend on hemlock, other species of invertebrates and so forth. So it regulates the stream flow and stream temperatures. You know, it's one of those, as a conifer in a cool, wet environment where pines don't typically dominate, it's something that's pumping water at other times of year when the hardwoods aren't. So yeah, it's a very unique species that creates its own unique ecosystem.
Yeah,
plus
but
people-
yeah. So and where does the I guess where did this woolly Adelgid that's attacking the hemlocks, where did it come from?
Where did it come from? Yeah.
And how does it attack and affect the trees and eventually kill them?
Yeah, the version of this insect that we have in the eastern United States, the lineage of it, if you will, came from Japan, came from the Osaka region of Japan, probably on infested Japanese hemlocks nursery stock, sometime in the first part of the 1900s. It was first detected in North America in the early 1950s in Virginia, and it has spread out from that initial epicenter south to Alabama and north to Maine and Nova Scotia, and now it has spread into Michigan. So it's covering, that pest is now covering over half the range of eastern hemlock. And yeah, it's a bad one. You know, it's one of the things that makes it really difficult to manage is that it does not have to mate. All of the Hemlock adelgid that we have in the eastern North America are females. Females giving rise to eggs that hatch as females, and it just keeps going and going and going. And the little crawlers disperse in the wind. They settle in on the hemlock twigs and they feed on nutrients. It's kind of like a sap-sucking insect, almost like an aphid. And once it latches onto a branch and inserts its stylet into the twig, it feeds on nutrients. And so that kind of saps the nutrient source out of the tree.
How do we what does this thing look like? Oh, go ahead, JD.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, yeah, that's a great question. First, what does it look like? And what do we need to be looking for to identify these pests if we have a problem before the tree starts to decline? Because I'm a beef cattle guy and a forage guy. And this kind of intrigues me, because I like to learn stuff that I'm, not, typically working with every day. So what do we need to be looking for here? Yeah, sure. See if I can find a good picture here. We'll do it the old-fashioned way. I'll just hold up a photo. How about that?
Okay. We're all about tradition here.
The reason the hemlock woolly adelgid is so named is that it's woolly, and you get these little white cottony masses on the hemlock twig. That's not going to work, is it, with that blur going on there? Oh well, we tried. Let me
Find a
take
picture.
that.
Actually,
let me
hold
take
it,
that.
hold it right in front of your face there, because it wants to
That's-
zoom in right on your face. Hey, let me
Let's
quit talking.
let's take this blur thing off. How do I do that? There's a way to do it. Video settings.
You can always pull up something if you could share your screen if you've got a.
Yeah, I could do that. Can you give me screen share? Let's see.
Yeah, you can do that, but
You have to. One of you guys have to enable it for me. I think it says it's. Well, we can just talk about it. So, if you flip over a hemlock branch, okay, just flip it over. It's going to look like tiny little cotton balls at the base of the needles in the winter and through most of the spring. In the summer, the Adelgid, its second generation goes and settles on the twigs as a tiny little crawler, and you're not going to see it with the naked eye. And the old wool from the previous adults is going to start to degrade and fall off. And so this time of year, you're not likely to see it. It's just starting to wake up, especially the further north you go. The Adelgid basically sleeps during the summer. It's a period called estivation. And then in the middle of the fall through the winter, it starts to produce the wool. So almost like tiny little cotton balls at the base of the needles on the underside of the branches. That's what you look for.
what size of the trees that I saw? But I mean, it's the little white places are pretty small.
They're very small. I mean, the size of BBs in your BB gun, probably.
Yep, that's it. Yeah, they're like a little white BB, but I mean, they cover it.
That's right. That's right.
So what is the threshold for these insects? I know probably most trees have these on them, and you got to have that threshold before they become a problem. So kind of
Yes.
what's the threshold for these?
Yeah, it's it's kind of a debatable topic. One of the things that we go on is we kind of measure the length of the twig in, let's say, centimeters, because we're scientists here. And so if you get more than about 2 of those per centimeter of length of the twig, then you've got a pretty heavy infestation. And the trouble with hemlock woolly adelgid is, it's a non-native invasive pest. And so in areas where the predators aren't established, and plus the tree doesn't have the natural defenses against the adelgid that it does in its native range. Hey, somebody put up an adelgid. Hey, thank you, Carlos. That's perfect.
Yeah, you're welcome.
There she is.
That the adelgid can go from, just a few adelgids on a tree to heavily infesting it in the next year or two, because the females are so prolific. I mean, one female can lay hundreds of eggs. And so even if you start with just a very light infestation, within the matter of a couple of years, you can be pretty heavily covered up, like you see there.
But from my understanding, they have 2 different periods. One of the problems to control is they have 2 different periods where they lay eggs during the year.
That's right. That's right. So the first egg laying takes place down here in the Southern Appalachians. We get it started in February, but it's usually pretty full on in March, laying eggs, and those will hatch and settle on the old twigs, because the hemlocks haven't leafed out or haven't put on new growth yet. So that first generation comes out in March and April, settles on the previous year's needles, and then that generation develops and lays another generation of eggs, usually in May and June. And then when those hatch, they settle on the new growth. So that does make it one of the challenging things of managing it, because our predator beetle that has had the most success and is most widely established feeds during that winter, early spring period, but then it goes in the ground and is not present during that late spring, early summer generation. And so that's been one of the challenges.
Now, with that life cycle, and I know we'll get into other treatments here too. When during that life cycle and or time of the year is the best time to treat these trees? And I know we'll talk about what to treat with later on, but what
Sure.
time of the year should we be looking at trying to control these?
Yeah. You can really treat just about any time of year. The best time well, let me say the worst time to treat, I would say, is in the middle of the summer when it's just blazing hot. The reason being that hemlocks are not as actively transpiring and pumping water during that super hot time of year. In fact, they do a lot of their transpiration in the spring and the fall when temperatures are warm enough to transpire, but the hardwood trees don't have any leaves. And so they're getting a lot of sunlight and they're pulling a lot of water. So spring and fall are great times to treat. You can also treat in the winter. You can treat early summer and late summer, but I would say avoid those really hot periods in July and August, just because they're not going to pull as much chemical.
Yeah, but that's speaking of some of the control measures. One of the things I was really interested in is this Laricobius nigrinus. Is that my Latin? I'll have to brush up on my Latin, but
that one's easier to say than the ST.
Yeah, that's one of the ones that biological control. Tell us a little bit about that. I mean, that's some of your research you're working on.
That's right.
How that's going, how long you've been working on that, and is that one of our best options, I guess?
Yeah. So the Laricobius beetles are an effort to use what we kind of call classical biological control. It's where you go to the native range of the pest and look for what's feeding on it there, and then test those predators or parasitoids or whatever they are, test them in quarantine, make sure they're going to be host specific and feeding on only the thing that you want it to feed on. And when the government approves that predator for release, then you can release it into the environment in the invaded range so it can feed on your pest. And so Laricobius nigrinus is one of the predators that process has been followed for. It's been released in the eastern US since 2003. I think the first releases were down here in the Southern Appalachians in North Carolina. And a student at Virginia Tech did a lot of the initial releases in those early 2000s. And the good thing about Laricobius nigrinus is it has established really well. A lot of the places where it's been released, it has taken hold. You have populations self-reproducing in the field. And like you said, JJ, it takes a while for these predators to build up. You think about, there are millions of adelgids in the hemlock forest once they get established. And that Laricobius beetle, unlike the adelgid, it has to mate. It has to find, the males and females have to find each other, and they only have one generation per year. They lay their eggs at about the same time that winter generation of adelgids is laying its eggs, and the beetle larvae feed inside those white cotton balls and eat adelgid eggs. And so we've done some research looking at the impact of Laricobius nigrinus, and it's pretty promising. There are a lot of places where we're seeing upwards of 70, 80, 90% of the adelgids being killed and disturbed. The larvae kind of work their way through that cotton ball and shred it all up, eat the eggs. So you can kind of tell which ones have been preyed on. So that impact is great. The problem is they don't get them all. And you still have in the eggs that are left over, even after Laricobius feeds, you still have a bunch of adelgids starting that next spring generation. So the Laricobius is a good part of the system. It's an important part of it, but it's not going to be that silver bullet, that everybody wishes you had, but you just don't have. And so that has caused us to explore for other predators as well. And the ones that show the most promise at this point are some flies. They're called silver flies, and they have been identified and gathered also from the Pacific Northwest. So that's where Laricobius nigrinus came from the Pacific Northwest, where Adelgid, a different lineage of the Adelgid, is actually native out there in Oregon and Washington and Idaho on mountain hemlock and western hemlock. The silver flies are now being evaluated for biocontrol, and they do attack both the winter and the spring generations of the Adelgid. So we don't have any successful establishment of those flies in the East yet, but they're still being released, they're still being tracked, still being research done, and we're hopeful that they can be part of the combination of predators on the Adelgid.
Yeah, what about this lady beetle that has the real tough name to pronounce that they brought? Is that actually, from what I was reading, it is native to Japan. It's like kind of a predator over there.
That's right. That's right.
How effective has it been?
That has been one of those insects that a lot of fantastic work was done on it to discover it. The Connecticut Agriculture Experiment Station back in the early 90s did some exploration work in Japan, identified that insect, got it approved for release, and it was really prolific in the lab. I mean, they could produce it by the millions. In fact, millions of beetles, of those lady beetles, have been released. The unfortunate thing is that it just has not been recovered at a rate that suggests that it's out there really doing a lot. It's difficult to point to any evidence, conclusive evidence, that it is reducing populations where it occurs. When you do find it, it occurs at very low densities. And so although it was a focus of the program for a while, because of that difficulty of recovering it, the focus has shifted over to the Laricobius beetles and the silver flies. And in addition, I should mention, in addition to the Laricobius nigrinus from the Pacific Northwest, we are also now releasing a Laricobius beetle from Japan, just like the ST beetle was located from the area where this Adelgid that we have came from. We also were able to, and I say we very loosely, I didn't do this research, but we the people, were able to identify, and a lot of this work was done at Virginia Tech, Scott Salem's lab at Virginia Tech, a Laricobius osakensis beetle. So it has been released in the US since about 2012. And, like Laricobius nigrinus, it has also established well and is starting to proliferate on the landscape on its own.
Now,
Go ahead.
If you're going to use more of a traditional, method there, we kind of like to have those predator insects. That's the easiest way for the to take care of the problem without disturbing the ecosystem and other ways. But if we did treat with a more traditional chemical method, what is out there that can treat for these?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great point. And just like I said that that the beetles are not a silver bullet, the chemical's not a silver bullet either. It's kind of one of those things that you can use in specific circumstances and for a limited amount of time. But in terms of the whole hemlock ecosystem, I always kind of think of it as like we need all the tools in the toolbox against the problem. And so chemical control is definitely one of those tools. And the two chemicals that are being used most widely to manage hemlock woolly adelgid are imidacloprid and dinotefuran. Imidacloprid is the one that probably gets the most use. It's a systemic chemical, so that means it can be taken up through the root system or even through the lower trunk of the tree and into the water conducting system. And the plant then carries it out to the branches where it's effective against the Adelgid. Both imidacloprid and dinotefran are systemic like that. They can be applied to the soil right around the base of the tree or directly to the trunk in what they call like a basal bark spray. And so it's very effective. In fact, even just a single treatment with imidacloprid, if you're applying it at the label rate, you can get 5 years of protection pretty consistently, sometimes even a little bit extra, 5 to 7 years out of one treatment. And one of the reasons that's why you get such a long treatment efficacy is because once that chemical gets into the hemlock metabolizes it into another compound called olefin, which is even more persistent and effective against the Adelgid that just stays in the tree. And so you get that extended protection. And so one of the things that we're working on now, in fact, we have a little landowner guide here. I don't know if it'll show. I'm trying to face thing, JD, but it's just not working.
It's still zooming in on your chest and neck. And I was hoping it would focus there on the page, but it's not.
Anyway,
I just want to see you do it, really. No,
that's right. He's tired of looking at me. We've got a little guide here about integrating chemical and biological control in the same forest stands, and so it offers guidelines. Let's say you're a homeowner with just a few trees in your yard that are hemlock and not a lot of other hemlock around. Biocontrol is probably not going to be a viable means by which your trees get protected because there's not a big hemlock forest in the area where these predator beetles can reproduce and spill over onto your trees. And so your best bet is probably to chemically treat those trees if you have Adelgid. And so that would be a great case for, either buy that chemical at your big box store or online, or have an arborist come treat your trees. That's the way to go. If you're a larger landowner and you've got a lot of hemlocks, or you're located next to public land where beetles have been released and are likely in the area and on your trees, this guide offers some suggestions about how to spatially arrange your treatments, when to treat, in relation to when beetles have been released, so on and so forth, that kind of give you some guidelines to help integrate those two things on the landscape.
Yeah, but Evan, don't we have a question from the audience or in the chat?
Yes, we do. And it was from Carlos. Could you explain what is honeydew and how it can help detect the pest?
Oh yeah, okay. So honeydew is the excrement of adelgids and aphids and other sap-feeding insects. And so they basically, as they feed, they are producing a sugary liquid out the back end. And as that liquid lands on the plant or on things below the plant even, there are species of fungi that colonize that sugary liquid, and they're usually a dark colored fungi, and hence the name sooty mold. And so you can see that on hemlock branches. You might even be able to kind of tell a little bit on that picture that Carlos has there, is that the twig, which is usually a nice kind of light colored tan on a mature hemlock or a green, you can see it's kind of dark under there. So there's sooty mold mixed in there on the twig as those adelgids are feeding, and you might see it on other parts of the plant too. So that's good, Carlos. That's one of the things that can help you detect not only adelgids but other sap feeding types of insects as well. I saw a comment pop up. What was the name of that metabolite? It's imidacloprid. So imidacloprid metabolizes to olefin. That's the metabolite, olefin.
Yeah, Bud, what talking for landowners and homeowners, about the proliferation of this disease. How how long does it take uh, the Adelgid to kill a good sized hemlock tree? I mean, how much time do homeowners have and to treat as far as how long it will take for it to kill these trees?
Yeah, yeah.
Or will it most of the time, I guess?
The answer, which nobody likes, is it depends. And down here in the Southern Appalachians, we had, especially in the Great Smoky Mountains, there's a lot of old growth hemlock. I mean, they have tens of thousands of acres of old growth forest there in the Smokies, and a lot of big old hemlock trees. And when the Adelgid first got here, it also coincided with a pretty severe drought. And so those old trees, which were growing real slowly and putting a lot of their energy into just maintenance, and then a drought on top of that and an Adelgid on top of that, many of those trees went really quickly. And so in that sense, Adelgid can kill trees quickly if they're kind of struggling already. At the same time, Adelgid has been in the eastern United States now for 70 plus years, and we still have hemlock trees in Virginia and Connecticut and North Carolina. So there are trees that have been able to endure this pest for multiple decades. And so it's going to depend. It's going to depend on the age of the tree, the health of the tree. Another thing that we've been doing a lot of research on recently is on sunlight. So as you may know, hemlock is our most shade tolerant tree in the eastern United States and Canada. I mean, you can put that tree in the dark forest as a seedling and it will survive for 100 years or more if it has to, waiting for its day in the sun for a gap to open up, and it can start really putting on some height growth. But when the Adelgid is present, trees in hemlock in the shade just go really quickly. Some of the trees that die the fastest are these understory trees in heavy shade. When they get the Adelgid, they just cannot withstand it. What we've been finding is that trees along edges or in canopy gaps often are doing better than their counterparts in the heavy shade. And so we've been doing silvicultural work. Can we actually cut some gaps around our hemlocks and open up some light to give them greater longevity, even in the presence of the Adelgid? So this is a long-winded way, JJ, of saying it depends. It's not likely to kill your tree, in a year or even 2 or 3 years. It's most likely that it's going to take some time. And so if you find this pest, you don't have to oh, the house is on fire, my tree's going to die. You have some time to make a chemical treatment. Imidacloprid is not as, I'll talk about those two chemicals again, okay? Imidacloprid is very long lasting. That's a great thing about it. You can get that 5 to 7 years out of a basal soil treatment. It's also a little bit less water soluble than the other one, dinotefran. So it takes a while for that one to get up in the tree. It might take a year for that tree to fully for that chemical to get fully from the roots all the way out to the tips of the branches. So don't expect that if you basal drench a tree, a week later, the Adelgids will be gone. That's
what's the dinotefran? What is the commercial name, I guess? Is that available to homeowners?
Yeah, that one is available.
Product name, I guess.
Yeah, what is it? You got me.
I'm not familiar.
I should know what it is. But
most of the for our extension work, and I'm sure that JD and Brandy and Evan can agree that we'll either tell people to use the Bayer tree and shrub or the Bonide product, and it's like an ounce, either a half an ounce or an ounce per inch of circumference of the tree. So it's pretty simple for the homeowners to use.
That's right.
Wasn't familiar with the other product.
Yes,
what about?
I'm
sorry. what about if these products, these newer products may have it on the label, for the treatment of the hemlock tree, but some of the older ones, I just had to have some imidacloprid Adonis 75 laying here on the desk, and I was kind of just flip through the label there, and I didn't see hemlock on the label. Now, what if it's the same active ingredient? What would you tell the homeowner about products that might have imidacloprid in it but not on the label?
I can't advise anybody to use a product in a way that is inconsistent with the label. So I would say try to get a chemical that says hemlock on the label and for hemlock adelgids. And the nice thing about imidacloprid is, I think it first came out as a Bayer product called Merit, but it's now off patent, and so there are a lot of different product names out there that have imidacloprid in it that are available. And so, I'm not going to sit here and name them, but it's out there. Water soluble. If you have a lot of hemlocks to treat, if you have just one or two, the homeowner brands in Home Depot or Lowe's are fine. If you've got a bunch of hemlocks to treat on your property, the water soluble packets, or WSP, is a good way to go, because you can soak those packets in a container, and a certain number of packets for a certain number of tree diameter that you're going to be treating. It's a real good resource. Also, there's an extension publication out of the University of Georgia that Elizabeth Benton McCarty put together, and it's an optimized dose. And it's got charts in the back of it that shows whether you're using water-soluble packets or you're using a different form of imidacloprid. There's also a tablet formulation of imidacloprid. So if you've got areas that are real steep, rugged terrain where it's hard to get to, hard to haul water up in those places, you can actually take the tablets up, and it tells you how many tablets to put in the soil around the tree. So there you have a variety of both ways and products that you can use to treat the trees. I was starting to mention that the imidacloprid takes a little bit longer to get in the tree, maybe up to a year. The dinotefran, which is a more expensive product per treatment, it's more expensive, but it's also more water soluble. So if you had a tree that was looking really good, but man, it's just coated, it's super coated with adelgids, I'm worried this thing is gonna start crashing on me, you might consider treating it with dinotefran, and that chemical gets up into the tree much more quickly, in a matter of weeks or months, and then instead of multiple months, and you'll get a quicker knockdown of the adelgid.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because there's multiple ways to do that, and you always want to read the label and be safe and use that chemical, whatever it is, in a safe manner. And
That's right.
And to the label, because off-label use is illegal. So we want to make sure that we do it safely and within the label of the product.
Absolutely. And it may not, even if it's the same active ingredient, it's not guaranteed to work, because of the formulation may not be tailored to the specific plant that you're treating.
Right.
Carlos just said the Safari is the name of that.
Safari. Thank you, Carlos. Safari. I'm getting old, man.
Carlos bailed you out again, bud.
He should have done this webinar.
I have a follow-up with because I've recommended treatment or helped with several homeowners here in Wood County. The bare tree and shrub, it says 12-month bare tree and shrub. So are you saying that that'll last more? We don't have to retreat maybe every couple years or 3 years, or how long do you think?
I'm less familiar with the efficacy of the homeowner versions. A lot of the research is done with the more the products that are designed for larger treatment acreage and numbers of trees, and so those are often the water soluble packets and or the tablets and so forth. But I can tell you that if if it's those more commercial or industrial scale products, you can get 5 years out of protection from imidacloprid. We plant hemlock seedlings at times to establish new stands for raising predators and so forth, and we put an imidacloprid tablet in the planting hole for those trees. And even as those trees gain size, and you would think they would start to outgrow the chemical, because of that olefin metabolism, those trees continue to stay Adelgid free for 4 or 5 years after the tablet's put in the ground, and sometimes more. So I can't say from personal experience that those homeowner formulations will last 5 to 7 years. It's worth monitoring your tree if you use those, but I do think you're going to get more than 12 months because of the way the hemlock metabolizes the imidacloprid. So I'd say count on more than a year for sure, and maybe just monitor. Go out and look at those branches each late spring and see if you're seeing the woolies, and that'll tell you when it's time to retreat.
But I do have a question down here. Okay, we've talked a lot about hemlock, wood, Adelgid. Is there any other insects, pests we should be looking for in our wood stands or in urban areas?
Oh goodness, you mean on other species of trees?
That we should just be keeping an eye out on, and what could be coming our way, or things to look out for?
Yeah. So I know you've heard about emerald ash borer and are covered up in it, so I won't sing that sad song. A one that's coming your way is called laurel wilt, and it affects sassafras trees. And also related to sassafras is northern spicebush, an understory shrub, Lindera benzoin. Those two species are in the laurel family, the Lauraceae. Unlike the name of the family, this disease does not affect mountain laurel. That's a different family, or rhododendron, anything like that. But the true laurel family has things in it like sassafras, spicebush, avocados in that family. If you were down on the coastal plain in the southeast, red bay is in the Lauraceae. So anyway, there's an ambrosia beetle, tiny little thing, I mean smaller than a grain of rice, carries a fungus into the trees in this family. The tree then gets a wilt disease, almost like a Dutch elm disease or an oak wilt, where it goes systemic in the tree and causes the tree to wilt. That disease was introduced into the coastal plain probably through packing material in the port of Savannah back in 2002. And that disease has now spread along the coast of North Carolina, south and west, all the way to Texas, through the entire range of red bay in the coastal plain, and is now pushing its way north and inland in sassafras. So as you guys know, West Virginia is like in the heart of the range of sassafras. I remember in forestry school, Harry Wyant would always have his classes go out onto the University Forest there in Morgantown on Chestnut Ridge and cut down a sassafras tree and bring it back for stem analysis. And his classes did that for years and years and years, and they never depleted the sassafras on the forest. So there's a lot of sassafras in West Virginia. If you're seeing sassafras wilting and dying, rapidly and in large numbers, that's worth reporting to your county extension. That could be a new detection of the disease. It's in Kentucky and it's in southwestern Virginia. So it's not going to be long before it shows up in southern West Virginia.
What was that? What was the name of that again, bud?
That disease is called laurel wilt.
Oh, okay.
And the beetle that carries the pathogen is called the red bay ambrosia beetle. And JJ, and I can get you guys information on that. I'm sure the forest health folks in West Virginia already know about it, but I can get you any information on that you'd like.
Yeah, Bud, you've kind of already answered this. We pretty much lost the battle against the emerald ash borer.
Yep.
If some of the ridgetop back roads that I travel in Wood County, you can just see the landscape littered with the dead ash trees. What do you think the future is for hemlocks? From what you were saying, they seem to be somewhat resilient.
Yeah, they're at least persistent. I'm encouraged. I don't have as bleak a view of hemlock as I do for ash. Number one, we still have hemlocks around. Even after 70 plus years of this pest being in the eastern US, we still have hemlock. It's not doing well. And it's certainly, we have a lot of hemlock trees that are still alive, but are not providing the same ecological benefit that they would if they had a nice, full, healthy crown. You see a lot of hemlocks out there with just a little tuft of foliage up at the top, and most of that lower crown is died back. So it's not, it's not a rosy picture, but I don't think it's also time to throw in the towel. And especially if we can begin to integrate these different management strategies that we have, and I'll mention them again. One is chemical control, as we've already talked about. One is biological control, and I think if we can get a combination of predators on the landscape, namely the 2 Laricobius species, and if the silverflies are also able to take hold, that would give us coverage of both Adelgid generations that might really start to help us reduce populations. There's then the silviculture. So we're doing research on, can we cut gaps in the forest or thin the forest out to let more sunlight on the hemlocks and help them endure the infestation a little bit more. We have to be careful about that, because as we let more light into a hemlock stand, we're starting to change the nature of the ecosystem. So there's, the details have to be worked out in that. But then there's also folks doing work. I'm not doing any of this work personally, but there are folks looking at genetic resistance in hemlock. The National Arboretum in Beltsville, Maryland has worked on a hybrid hemlock between a Carolina and a Chinese hemlock. It's an ornamental variety of hemlock that's now available, called a traveler. That's some of the work that's been done. It's not going to likely repopulate the forest, but it is a tree that's got some of our native hemlock phenotype to it that's resistant to the Adelgid. And so there's being more work done on resistance in eastern hemlock, especially through the Northern Research Station. So if we can bring all these tools to bear on hemlocks in general, I think we can make some progress, and a few decades down the road be in a better place than we are now.
Any questions or comments from the audience? I think that Carlos was just adding that yes, over the counter you can buy imidacloprid either in the Bear Tree and Shrub, or the Bonide has a tree and shrub product as well. Just make sure that, like JD said, that you read the label. For homeowners, pretty simple to. You may mix that concentrate with water depending on the circumference of the tree, and then you can treat that. And as I learned today, through the metabolism of the tree, it may last longer than 12 months. So, which is good.
Yeah.
Anything else, JD?
I think we pretty much covered that subject very well. Thank you so much for coming on. And I think JJ has 2 last questions for you.
Oh yeah. Bud, my dad always said there's 2 types of music, country and Western. So who is your favorite country artist?
Oh goodness, that's a tough one to choose from.
Are you traditional or new wave country?
Oh, traditional. I really like I like Merle Haggard. I like Ricky Skaggs, both his country and his bluegrass.
First vote for Ricky.
Patsy Cline also is one of my favorites. So yeah, I could go on and on, but those 3 rise to the top.
Oh, Patsy Cline. What's your favorite Patsy Cline song?
Oh, Crazy. That's about my favorite song ever. That Crazy. One and Walking After Midnight.
There you go. Yeah, the that was our first vote though for Ricky Skaggs.
Okay. Okay. Very good.
And of course, you know, he's actually, isn't he from Kentucky?
He is. Yep. He is.
Do we have any questions too from the audience?
Yeah.
You know, we didn't open it up to the audience. Is there any questions there that you may have a burning desire to ask? I don't think we have any,
Put them all to
JJ.
sleep.
Oh, you done better than that. I taught
Hey,
high school a couple of days ago, and you always have one or two fall asleep on you.
Hey, like I said, we appreciate Bud coming on. I just wanted to mention next week we're talking about pasture and hay field reseeding and cover crops with Ben Goff from over in Mason County and Alan Galler from Sandusky County up in Ohio State. Friday, October 8th, agritourism in West Virginia with D Knight. Friday, October 15th, we'd be talking about direct marketing with Lisa Jones at the Small Farm Center and Christy Welch from Ohio State. And then October 22nd, growing specialty crops with Lewis Jett and from WVU and Brad Birchford. And then finally, we're going to finish off the month with October 29th, talking about the Women in Agriculture Conference. We'll have one of our hosts, Brandy Brabham, Emily Morrow, and Stacy Huffman, all with WVU Extension. So, and I just wanted to mention all of our programs here at WVU and activities offered by the Extension Service are available to all persons without regard to race, color, sex, disability, religion, age, veteran status, political beliefs, sexual orientation, national origin, and marital or family status. Like I said, we really had a great conversation. I appreciate everybody getting on. Especially good to see old Mike Shamblin. Shamblin, you still with us?
I'm still here, JJ.
Okay, good.
Good information today. Thank you.
Hey, you're welcome. I had to show I got my golden blue.
There you go. There you
We
go.
appreciate that. You can come to West Virginia anytime. Yeah, we were being quiet because you did such a thorough job of explaining the topic, so I couldn't think of anything to ask. So good job.
Great. Good to hear. Well, it's been an honor to be on your program, and much success to you with the rest of your speakers. And JJ, if I think of something that I can send you via email, I'll shoot it to you. And if you have a way to get it to your distribution list, you can feel free to share it.
Great. Thank you very much, Bud.
Okay.
I think that's all for today. JD, sign us off.
Oh yeah, thank y'all all for joining in today for our great Mountaineer Farm Talk, the voice of West Virginia agriculture. Until next time, we'll see you around the ridge.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bud. Okay, stop.